Emma Johnson had always believed she had the perfect marriage. She and Robert had been inseparable since they met in college. They built a life together, shared dreams, and supported each other through ups and downs. But all of that came crashing down one fateful evening when Emma stumbled upon a letter in Robert's office, hidden behind a stack of old tax documents. The letter was addressed to someone named Sarah in Seattle and was filled with intimate details about Robert's life with another family. As she read the letter, Emma's hands trembled and her heart raced. The words on the paper blurred as tears welled up in her eyes. She felt a deep, searing pain in her chest, a mixture of betrayal and devastation that left her breathless. How could he? She whispered to herself, her voice cracking. The man she loved, the man she trusted, had been living a double life, deceiving her in the most profound way possible. Hours passed in a haze as Emma sat in the dimly lit office, the letter clutched in her hand. She replayed moments from their marriage in her mind, searching for signs she might have missed. Every laugh, every kiss, every shared secret now felt tainted. She couldn't comprehend how Robert had managed to keep such a significant part of his life hidden from her. The more she thought about it, the more her shock turned into a burning desire for answers. When Robert finally returned home that night, Emma was waiting for him in the living room. The letter lay on the coffee table, an unspoken accusation. Robert walked in, smiling, but his expression quickly shifted to confusion when he saw the look on Emma's face. "Emma? What's wrong?" he asked, concern lacing his voice. She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she picked up the letter and handed it to him. "Care to explain this?" she demanded, her voice cold and steady despite the turmoil inside her. Robert's face paled as he read the letter. He looked up at Emma, his eyes wide with panic. "Emma, I can explain." "Explain?" she interrupted, her voice rising. "Explain how you've been lying to me for God knows how long? How you have another family in Seattle? How you've been living a double life?" Robert opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He was caught and he knew it. After a moment of silence, he finally managed to say, "Emma, please, just let me explain. It's not what you think." "Then what is it, Robert?" she shot back. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks exactly like what I think it is. You've been cheating on me. You've been lying to me every single day." Robert's shoulders slumped, and he sighed heavily. "Yes, I have another family in Seattle," he admitted quietly. "But it's complicated. I never meant to hurt you." Emma felt a sharp pang of anger and betrayal. "How could you do this to me? To us?" Robert looked down at his feet, unable to meet her gaze. "It just happened, Emma. I got involved with Sarah years ago before we even met. And then, when I met you, I couldn't just walk away from her. I thought I could manage both lives, keep everything separate." "Separate?" Emma's voice was incredulous. "You thought you could keep two families separate and no one would ever find out? That's insane, Robert. I know it sounds crazy, but I thought I could handle it," he said, desperation creeping into his voice. "I love you, Emma. I love both of you." Emma shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "You don't get to say that. You don't get to claim you love me when you've been lying to me this whole time." Robert reached out to touch her, but she recoiled. "Don't," she said firmly. "Just don't." She turned away from him, trying to gather her thoughts. The pain was almost unbearable, but beneath it, a new resolve was forming. She couldn't let him get away with this. He had to face the consequences of his actions. In the days that followed, Emma's grief morphed into a cold, determined rage. She spent hours on her computer, researching everything she could about Robert's life in Seattle. She found Sarah's social media profiles, photos of Robert with a woman and children she had never seen before. Each new discovery was like a knife twisting in her heart, but it only fueled her determination. One evening, as Emma sat at her desk, her phone rang. It was her boss, Thomas, checking in on her. "Emma, you haven't been yourself lately. Is everything okay?" he asked, his voice filled with genuine concern. She hesitated for a moment before responding. "I'm going through something personal, Thomas. complicated. If you need to talk, or if there's anything I can do to help, just let me know," he offered. "Thank you, Thomas. I appreciate it," she replied, grateful for his kindness but knowing she couldn't share the full extent of her turmoil with him. As the days turned into weeks, Emma's plan began to take shape. She decided that she needed to go to Seattle to see Robert's other life firsthand and gather more information. She didn't tell Robert of her intentions. She simply packed a bag and booked a flight. Her mind was set on one thing: uncovering the truth and making Robert pay for his betrayal. Upon arriving in Seattle, Emma felt a mix of anxiety and determination. She rented a small apartment near where she had discovered Robert lived with Sarah and their children. It was crucial for her to stay unnoticed, to blend in and observe. She took on a temporary job at a nearby cafe, giving her an excuse to be in the area without drawing suspicion. Each day, Emma followed Robert discreetly, watching him interact with Sarah and their children. The sight of him playing the role of a devoted husband and father was almost too much to bear. She felt a deep, burning anger, but also a profound sadness for the life she thought she had. One afternoon, while working at the cafe, Emma noticed Sarah coming in with her 2 children. Her heart pounded as she realized this was her chance to get closer to the woman who had unknowingly been part of the deception. Emma served them with a warm smile, her demeanor hiding the storm of emotions inside her. "Your kids are adorable," Emma commented as she handed Sarah her order. "How old are they?" Sarah smiled, clearly proud of her children. "Thank you. They're 5 and 7. Emma nodded, her mind racing. "I just moved to the area. Do you live around here?" "Yes, we do," Sarah replied. "Welcome to Seattle. It's a great place to live, especially for families." As they chatted, Emma felt a pang of guilt. Sarah seemed kind and genuine, completely unaware of the web of lies surrounding her. But Emma reminded herself that Sarah deserved to know the truth, just as she had. Over the next few weeks, Emma made an effort to befriend Sarah, all the while gathering information about Robert's double life. The more she learned, the more she realized how deep the deception went. It wasn't just about infidelity. There were financial discrepancies and suspicious transactions that hinted at something much bigger. One evening, after weeks of careful planning and observation, Emma decided it was time to confront Sarah with the truth. She invited Sarah to her apartment under the pretense of having a girls' night. As they sipped wine and chatted, Emma could feel the weight of the impending revelation. "Sarah, there's something I need to tell you," Emma began, her voice steady but filled with emotion. Sarah looked at her curiously. "What is it, Emma?" Taking a deep breath, Emma continued, "I didn't come to Seattle by chance. I came here because I discovered something about my husband, Robert." Sarah's expression shifted to one of concern. "What do you mean?" Emma reached for her phone and pulled up the photos and documents she had gathered. "Robert has been living a double life. He's my husband too. And I had no idea about you and your children until I found a letter he had hidden." Sarah's face went pale as she stared at the evidence. "This can't be true," she whispered, her voice shaking. "I'm so sorry, Sarah," Emma said, her eyes welling up with tears. "I know how much this hurts because I went through the same thing, but you deserve to know the truth." For a moment, Sarah was silent, processing the bombshell that had just been dropped on her. Then, tears began to stream down her face. "How could he do this to us?" she cried, her voice filled with anguish. Emma reached out and took Sarah's hand. "I don't know, but we need to stick together. We need to find out everything he's been hiding and make sure he faces the consequences." As the 2 women sat together, united by their shared betrayal, they made a pact to uncover the full extent of Robert's deception. Emma's journey for vengeance had now become a quest for justice, not just for herself, but for Sarah and their children as well. Emma arrived in Seattle with a heavy heart, her mind swirling with a mix of determination and uncertainty. She hadn't informed Robert of her trip, ensuring that her movements remained undetected. As the plane descended into Seattle, the city's skyline came into view, a stark reminder of the double life Robert had been leading. She could hardly believe that the man she thought she knew so well had managed to keep such a monumental secret from her. Once she settled into a modest hotel, Emma began her surveillance. She waited, blending into the cityscape, watching Robert's every move. It didn't take long for her to find the suburban neighborhood where Sarah, Robert's other wife, lived. Nestled in a quiet, tree-lined street, the house was the epitome of suburban bliss. Emma's heart clenched as she saw Robert playing in the front yard with two children, their laughter ringing out, a stark contrast to the turmoil brewing within her. One afternoon, as she watched from a distance, Emma couldn't help but feel a wave of sadness wash over her. These children were innocent, oblivious to the deceit that underpinned their family life. She wondered if they would ever understand why their father had chosen to live such a duplicitous life. Her sadness quickly morphed into anger as she thought of the betrayal she had endured. Determined to gather more information, Emma decided to get closer to Sarah's life. She found a temporary job at a local cafe, conveniently located near Sarah's home. This allowed her to observe the family's routines without arousing suspicion. Days turned into weeks as Emma meticulously documented every detail of Robert's life in Seattle. She noted the times he left the house, his interactions with neighbors, and the various activities he engaged in with Sarah and the children. One rainy afternoon, as Emma was wiping down tables in the cafe, she overheard a conversation between two customers discussing a local community event. Emma's ears perked up when she heard Sarah's name mentioned. Seizing the opportunity, she joined the conversation, introducing herself as a new resident eager to get involved in the community. "Oh, hi, I'm Emma," she said, forcing a friendly smile. "I just moved to the area and I'm looking to get to know my neighbors. I heard you mention a community event." One of the women, a middle-aged lady with kind eyes, looked up and smiled back. "Yes, we're organizing a charity bake sale this weekend. Sarah, Robert's wife, is one of the main organizers. It's a great way to meet people." Emma's heart skipped a beat at the mention of Sarah. "That sounds wonderful. I'd love to help out. How can I get in touch with Sarah?" The woman scribbled an address and a phone number on a napkin. "Just give her a call or drop by her house. She's always looking for volunteers." Emma thanked the woman and tucked the napkin into her pocket. This was her chance to get closer to Sarah, to infiltrate her life and gather the information she needed. The next day, Emma mustered her courage and knocked on Sarah's door. The woman who answered looked every bit as kind and unsuspecting as Emma had imagined. With a warm smile, Sarah invited Emma in, and they quickly bonded over shared interests and the upcoming charity event. "I'm so glad you decided to help," Sarah said as they sat in the living room, surrounded by baking supplies. "It's always nice to have new faces in the community." Emma nodded, her mind racing with conflicting emotions. Here she was, sitting in the home of the woman who had unknowingly shared her husband. She couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt as she thought about the deception she was perpetuating. But she reminded herself of her mission, to uncover the truth and hold Robert accountable. Over the next few weeks, Emma and Sarah spent a lot of time together, planning the bake sale and getting to know each other. Emma learned that Sarah was completely unaware of Robert's double life. Sarah spoke lovingly of Robert, recounting stories of their life together, each one a knife to Emma's heart. One evening, as they were packing up after the bake sale, Emma decided it was time to confront the truth. She couldn't keep up the charade any longer. "Sarah, there's something I need to tell you," Emma began, her voice trembling. "It's about Robert." Sarah looked up, confusion etched on her face. "What do you mean?" Emma took a deep breath and began to recount her story, from finding the hidden letter to discovering Robert's secret life. As she spoke, she watched the color drain from Sarah's face, her eyes widening in disbelief. "That can't be true," Sarah whispered, tears welling up in her eyes. "Robert would never do that. You're lying." Emma shook her head, her own eyes filling with tears. "I wish I were, Sarah, but it's the truth. I've seen it with my own eyes." For a moment, the room was filled with a heavy silence, the weight of the revelation hanging between them. Then, Sarah broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. Emma reached out to comfort her, feeling a deep sense of empathy for the woman who had been as deceived as she had. As the days passed, Sarah slowly began to accept the reality of the situation. She and Emma formed an unlikely alliance, united by their shared betrayal. Together, they began to dig deeper into Robert's life, uncovering more secrets and lies. They discovered financial discrepancies and suspicious transactions, hinting at a far more sinister side to Robert's deceit. Emma's quest for vengeance had evolved into a mission for justice, not just for herself, but for Sarah and the children as well. She knew it wouldn't be easy, but with Sarah by her side, she felt stronger and more determined than ever. As they delved deeper into the web of lies, Emma realized that this journey was about more than just exposing Robert. It was about reclaiming their lives and finding the strength to move forward. Emma, driven by a mix of fury and sorrow, made it her mission to infiltrate Robert's other life in Seattle. Her initial steps were cautious, calculated. She adopted a new identity, and with some well-placed lies and manipulation, she managed to befriend Sarah, Robert's unsuspecting other wife. Emma introduced herself as Emily, a new face in the neighborhood, eager to make friends. Sarah, warm and welcoming, quickly took to her. "Emily, you must join us for dinner sometime," Sarah suggested warmly one afternoon. They were sitting at a quaint cafe near Sarah's house, sipping coffee. "It's been ages since we had someone new over." Emma forced a smile, masking the inner turmoil. "I'd love that, Sarah. It must be wonderful, having such a beautiful family." Sarah's eyes sparkled with pride. "Oh, they are my world. Robert works so hard to keep us happy. I couldn't ask for a better husband." Emma felt a pang of bitterness but maintained her composure. "He sounds like a wonderful man," she replied, the words burning her throat. Over the following weeks, Emma's bond with Sarah grew. She found herself in Sarah's home often, observing the life Robert had built with another woman. Emma's initial anger gave way to a more profound sense of betrayal. Sarah had no clue about Robert's deceit. The children adored him, and he seemed to play the part of the loving husband and father flawlessly. One evening, after a particularly pleasant dinner at Sarah's, Emma and Sarah sat in the living room, chatting while the children played upstairs. Emma seized the moment to probe deeper. "Sarah, how did you and Robert meet?" she asked, feigning casual curiosity. Sarah laughed softly. "It's a funny story, actually. We met at a conference in Chicago. He was charming, intelligent, everything I had ever dreamed of. Felt like fate." Emma nodded, her mind racing. "He must travel a lot for work then?" "Yes, quite a bit. It can be tough, but we manage," Sarah admitted, a hint of sadness in her voice. Emma's heart ached for Sarah. She saw the genuine love and trust Sarah had for Robert. It made her question her motives, but simultaneously fueled her resolve. Sarah deserved to know the truth. The next day, Emma decided it was time to reveal everything. She invited Sarah to her temporary apartment, under the pretense of needing help with some home decor ideas. As they sat down with coffee, Emma took a deep breath. "Sarah, there's something I need to tell you," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "It's about Robert." Sarah looked puzzled. "What is it, Emily?" "First, my name isn't Emily. It's Emma, and I'm not new to the neighborhood. I'm Robert's wife." "His other wife," Emma confessed, her eyes locking onto Sarah's. Sarah's face went pale. "What? No, that's impossible. Robert would never." Emma interrupted gently. "I found a letter in his office. That's how I discovered his secret life here. I didn't want to believe it either, but it's true." Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes. "No, there must be some mistake. Robert loves us. He..." Emma reached into her bag and pulled out the letter, handing it to Sarah. "This is the letter I found. It details everything. I've also been watching. I know it sounds crazy, but I had to be sure." Sarah's hands trembled as she read the letter. The color drained from her face, and tears began streaming down her cheeks. "How could he do this to us? To our children?" she whispered, her voice breaking. Emma placed a comforting hand on Sarah's shoulder. "I'm so sorry, Sarah. I didn't want to hurt you, but you needed to know the truth." For a long moment, They sat in silence, the weight of the revelation hanging heavily in the air. Finally, Sarah spoke, her voice filled with determination. "We can't let him get away with this. He needs to be held accountable." Emma nodded. "I agree, but we need to be smart about this. There's more to Robert's deception than just his double life. I suspect he's involved in something much darker." Sarah wiped her tears, her expression hardening. "Then we need to find out what it is. Together." From that moment, Emma and Sarah formed an unlikely alliance. Their shared pain and betrayal bonded them, and together they vowed to uncover all of Robert's secrets. Emma had initially sought vengeance, but now she was driven by a desire for justice, not just for herself but for Sarah and their children. Over the next few weeks, they began their investigation in earnest. Emma used her skills to dig into Robert's financial records, while Sarah kept a close watch on his movements. They discovered discrepancies in his accounts, money transfers that made no sense, and hidden bank accounts. One evening, as they pored over documents in Emma's apartment, Sarah gasped. "Look at this, Emma. These transactions. They lead to a company I've never heard of. And the amounts? They're huge." Emma leaned over to examine the papers. "You're right. This can't be legitimate business. We need to trace these transactions and find out where the money is going." Their investigation led them down a rabbit hole of fraudulent activities. They uncovered evidence that Robert was embezzling money from his own companies, funneling it into offshore accounts. The deeper they dug, the more dangerous it became. They realized that Robert wasn't acting alone. He was part of a larger, more sinister network. One afternoon, while Sarah was at home, Emma received a call from her. "Emma, I think I found something. There's a name that keeps coming up in these documents. Mark. Do you know who he is?" Emma's blood ran cold. "Mark? No, but I'll find out. Be careful, Sarah. We don't know how deep this goes." As Emma researched, she discovered that Mark was a notorious investor with ties to criminal organizations. The realization that Robert was entangled with such dangerous people sent chills down her spine. Emma and Sarah knew they had to be cautious. They continued gathering evidence, documenting every fraudulent transaction, every connection to Mark. They couldn't risk confronting Robert until they had enough proof to ensure he couldn't wriggle out of the consequences. Their alliance grew stronger with each passing day. They shared their fears, their hopes, and their determination to see justice served. Emma found herself caring deeply for Sarah and her children, feeling a sense of responsibility to protect them from the fallout of Robert's actions. One evening, as they sat together, exhausted but resolute, Sarah turned to Emma. "Thank you, Emma, for everything. I don't know how I would have faced this alone." Emma smiled softly. "We're in this together, Sarah. We'll see it through to the end." Their journey was far from over, but they were no longer alone. They had each other, and that gave them the strength to keep fighting. As they pieced together the puzzle of Robert's deceit, they knew that their quest for justice would not only hold him accountable, but also help them reclaim their lives from the shadows of his lies. Emma and Sarah began their investigation into Robert's finances with a sense of urgency and a shared goal: to uncover the truth and protect their families. The initial steps were tedious and frustrating. They pored over bank statements, tax returns, and business records, looking for any signs of fraud or irregularities. Emma, with her analytical mind and background in marketing, focused on tracing the money flow, while Sarah utilized her knowledge of Robert's personal habits to identify any suspicious activities. One evening, as they sat in Sarah's kitchen surrounded by stacks of paperwork, Emma's eyes lit up. "Look at this," she said, pointing to a series of transactions on one of Robert's accounts. "There are several large withdrawals here, all made in cash. Why would he need so much cash?" Sarah frowned as she leaned over to examine the documents. "And they're all made around the same time each month. What could he be doing with that money?" Their suspicions grew as they continued to dig deeper. They discovered that Robert had set up multiple shell companies, all with vague business purposes and no clear sources of income. The transactions between these entities were convoluted, designed to obfuscate the true nature of the money flow. Emma's heart pounded in her chest as she realized the magnitude of what they were uncovering. This wasn't just about infidelity. Robert was involved in something much darker. These companies, Emma mused aloud, tapping her pen on one of the documents. They're a front for something. We need to figure out what they're really for. Sarah nodded, her face set in a determined grimace. We need more evidence. Something concrete that we can take to the authorities. As they continued their investigation, Emma and Sarah uncovered documents suggesting that Robert was involved in fraudulent activities. There were forged signatures, false invoices, and financial statements that didn't add up. The more they uncovered, the more their anger and resolve grew. They were no longer just wronged wives. They were warriors on a mission to bring Robert to justice. One night, after hours of scrutinizing documents, Sarah looked up at Emma, her eyes tired but resolute. We need to confront him with this, she said. But we can't do it without solid proof. We need to gather everything we can. Emma agreed. We need to be smart about this. If we go to him without enough evidence, he could destroy everything and disappear. We have to be prepared for anything. The women worked tirelessly, their bond growing stronger with each passing day. They shared their fears, their hopes, and their determination to see this through. Emma found solace in Sarah's strength, and Sarah drew courage from Emma's unwavering resolve. One afternoon, as they sifted through yet another pile of documents, they stumbled upon a file that made their blood run cold. It detailed a series of transactions between Robert and a man named Mark. The amounts were staggering, and the descriptions were vague. But one thing was clear: Mark was not someone to be trifled with. Who is this Mark? Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Emma's face was pale as she replied, I don't know, but we need to find out. If Robert is involved with someone like this, it could mean serious trouble. They dug deeper, using every resource at their disposal to uncover information about Mark. What they found was terrifying. Mark was an investor with a reputation for ruthless business practices and criminal connections. He was dangerous, and Robert was in way over his head. We need to be careful, Emma warned. If Robert is in debt to someone like Mark, it means we're all in danger. We need to gather as much evidence as we can and go to the authorities. But we have to do it smartly, or we could all be at risk. Sarah agreed, her eyes wide with fear. We can't let Robert know what we're doing. We have to act like everything is normal until we have everything we need. Their investigation took on a new urgency. They worked late into the night, their nerves frayed but their resolve unbroken. They were determined to protect their children and bring Robert to justice, no matter the cost. One evening, as they were going through yet another stack of documents, Sarah's phone rang. She answered it, her face growing pale as she listened. It's Robert, she mouthed to Emma, who felt a knot of fear tighten in her stomach. Hey, honey, Sarah said, forcing a smile into her voice. What's up? Robert's voice was smooth and reassuring, but Emma could hear the underlying tension. Just checking in. How are things going? Everything's fine, Sarah replied, her eyes meeting Emma's with a look of steely determination. Just the usual. How about you? Busy as always, Robert said with a chuckle. I'll be home late tonight. Don't wait up. As Sarah hung up, she turned to Emma, her face set in a grim mask. We need to move quickly, she said. He's getting suspicious. Emma nodded, her mind racing. We need to gather everything we have and make a plan. We can't afford to make any mistakes. The women worked feverishly, their fear and determination driving them forward. They knew they were racing against time, but they were determined to see this through. They had come too far to back down now. As they gathered the last of the evidence, Emma looked at Sarah, her eyes filled with resolve. We can do this, she said. We have to do this. For our children and for ourselves. Sarah nodded, her eyes blazing with determination. Let's bring him down. With their evidence in hand, Emma and Sarah prepared for the final confrontation. They knew it wouldn't be easy, but they were ready. They had each other and they had the truth. And they were determined to see justice done, no matter the cost. Returning to her home after the tumultuous days in Seattle, Emma felt an oppressive weight on her shoulders. The emotional turmoil of discovering Robert's betrayal and the subsequent alliance with Sarah had taken its toll on her. She had barely slept, and the constant stress gnawed at her every waking moment. The once vibrant and confident Emma now found herself struggling to maintain her composure, especially at work. Emma's workplace had always been her sanctuary, a place where she excelled, finding solace in her competence and the respect of her colleagues. However, in recent days, her performance had visibly declined. Her mind was a chaotic swirl of thoughts, making it difficult to focus on even the simplest tasks. Her desk, usually organized to perfection, was now cluttered with papers and files that she couldn't bring herself to sort through. Thomas, Emma's boss, was a keen observer. He had noticed the change in her demeanor and the decline in her productivity. Thomas was a tall man with a calm, reassuring presence. He had always been supportive of his employees, and Emma was no exception. Sensing something was amiss, he decided to approach her gently. One afternoon, Thomas knocked on the open door of Emma's office. "Emma, do you have a minute?" he asked, stepping inside. Emma looked up from her desk, her eyes betraying her fatigue. "Of course, Thomas. What's up?" she replied, trying to muster a smile. Thomas closed the door behind him and took a seat across from her. "I've noticed you've been distracted lately. Is everything okay?" he asked, his voice filled with genuine concern. Emma hesitated, unsure of how much she should reveal. She had always kept her personal life separate from her work, but the burden she was carrying felt too heavy to bear alone. It's been a rough time, Thomas. There are some personal issues I'm dealing with," she admitted, her voice trembling slightly. Thomas nodded understandingly. "I can see that. If there's anything I can do to help, please let me know. Your well-being is important, not just for your work, but for you as a person." The sincerity in his words touched Emma deeply. She had always respected Thomas, but in that moment, she felt a profound sense of gratitude. "Thank you, Thomas. It means a lot to hear that," she said, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Thomas leaned forward slightly, his expression serious but kind. "I want you to know that my door is always open. If you ever need to talk about anything, I'm here." Emma nodded, feeling a flicker of relief. Over the next few days, Thomas made it a point to check in on her, offering small gestures of support, a kind word here, a coffee break there. Gradually, Emma began to feel a sense of trust building between them. One evening, after a particularly grueling day, Emma found herself lingering in her office, unable to face the empty silence of her home. Thomas noticed her still at her desk and decided to approach her again. "Emma, why don't you call it a day? You look like you could use a break," he suggested. Emma sighed, running a hand through her hair. "I know, I don't want to go home right now. Too many thoughts, too much to process." Thomas looked at her thoughtfully. "How about we grab a bite to eat? Sometimes a change of scenery helps clear the mind." Emma considered his offer and nodded. "That sounds nice, actually. Thank you, Thomas." They went to a small, cozy restaurant nearby. As they sat down, the casual atmosphere helped Emma feel more at ease. Over the meal, Thomas steered the conversation towards lighter topics at first, sharing anecdotes from his own life and making Emma laugh for the first time in days. Eventually, the conversation circled back to her. "Emma, I don't want to pry, but if you feel comfortable, maybe talking about what's been troubling you could help. Sometimes sharing the burden makes it a bit easier," Thomas suggested gently. Emma took a deep breath. The urge to confide in someone was overwhelming, and Thomas had proven himself to be a compassionate listener. "It's about my husband, Robert," she began hesitantly. "I found out he has a second family in Seattle. And it's not just that. There are other complications, things I can't even begin to process." Thomas listened intently, his expression one of quiet empathy. "That's a lot to handle, Emma. I can't imagine how you must be feeling right now." Emma continued, feeling a sense of relief as she spoke. "I've been working with Sarah, the other wife, to uncover the truth. We found out things about Robert that go beyond infidelity, fraud, deceit. It's like my entire life is unraveling, and I don't know how to stop it." Thomas reached out, placing a reassuring hand on hers. "You're incredibly brave, Emma. Facing something like this head-on takes immense strength. And you're not alone in this. I'm here to help in any way I can." Emma felt a warmth spread through her at his words. For the first time in weeks, she felt a glimmer of hope. "Thank you, Thomas. Your support means the world to me," she said, her voice filled with gratitude. As the evening wore on, Emma found herself opening up more to Thomas. They discussed strategies, possible legal implications, and ways to gather more evidence against Robert. Thomas's insights and advice were invaluable, and Emma began to see him not just as her boss, but as a true ally in her quest for justice. In the days that followed, Thomas continued to support Emma both professionally and personally. He offered her flexibility at work, allowing her to take the time she needed to deal with her situation. His unwavering support and understanding helped Emma regain some of her strength and focus. One evening, after another long day of piecing together the puzzle of Robert's deceit, Thomas and Emma found themselves alone in the office. The air was thick with unspoken words and a growing closeness between them. Thomas broke the silence, his voice gentle yet firm. "Emma, I want you to know that whatever happens, you have someone in your corner. You're not alone in this fight." Emma looked at him, her eyes reflecting a mixture of gratitude and something more profound. "Thank you, Thomas. You've been a lifeline for me. I don't know how I would have managed without your support." Thomas smiled, his eyes meeting hers with a warmth that sent a shiver down her spine. "We'll get through this, Emma, together." As they continued to work side by side, a deep bond began to form between them. Emma found herself drawn to Thomas in ways she hadn't expected. His kindness, his unwavering support, and his strength became a beacon of hope in her turbulent life. And as they navigated the complexities of her situation, Emma realized that her journey for justice had brought her an unexpected ally and, perhaps, a chance at new beginnings. Emma and Sarah had reached a critical juncture in their quest for justice. The weeks of meticulous investigation had finally borne fruit. They sat in Sarah's modest kitchen, the air thick with a mixture of anticipation and dread. The table was strewn with papers, bank statements, and a laptop displaying a spreadsheet of numbers that depicted the tangled web of Robert's financial schemes. Emma, her eyes red from sleepless nights and the strain of unrelenting determination, pointed to a highlighted row on the screen. "This is it, Sarah. These are the secret accounts Robert has been using. Look at the transfers. Large sums moving in and out, perfectly timed with his business trips." Sarah, her face pale but set with resolve, nodded. "We need to find out who else is involved. If he's been able to hide this for so long, he must have had help." Emma agreed. "I think we've found someone. Look at this name, Mark. He appears multiple times in these transactions. It seems Robert has been paying him off regularly." Sarah's brow furrowed. "Mark? Do we know anything about him?" "Not much," Emma admitted. "But I did some digging. He's an investor, but not the legitimate kind. He's got a record, Sarah. Fraud, extortion, even a suspicion of involvement in a couple of disappearances." Sarah's eyes widened. "So Robert is mixed up with a criminal. This keeps getting worse." Emma leaned back in her chair, rubbing her temples. "It means Robert is in deeper trouble than we thought. If he owes Mark money, we're all in danger." The two women sat in silence for a moment, the gravity of their discovery sinking in. The implications were chilling. Robert wasn't just a cheater. He was entangled in a world of crime that could have dire consequences for everyone involved. "We need to be very careful," Emma said finally. "If Mark finds out we're onto him, there's no telling what he might do." Sarah nodded, her expression grim. "We need to gather more evidence and think of a plan. But we can't let fear stop us." Determined to see it through, they spent the next few days intensifying their efforts. Emma used her skills as a former financial analyst to dig deeper into the transactions, while Sarah reached out to some of her contacts to gather any additional information on Mark. One evening, as they were poring over the documents, Emma's phone buzzed. It was a message from Thomas, her boss and confidant. "How's everything?" Found anything new? The text read. Emma bit her lip. She hadn't told Thomas the full extent of what they had uncovered yet, partly to protect him and partly because she wasn't sure whom she could trust anymore. But she needed his help. She typed back, "Yes, but it's dangerous. I think Robert is involved with a criminal named Mark. Can we meet?" Thomas responded almost immediately, "Of course. Be careful. Let's meet at the usual place tomorrow." The next day, Emma met Thomas in a quiet corner of a local cafe. She explained everything they had discovered, including the connection to Mark. Thomas listened intently, his face growing more serious with every detail. "Emma, this is serious. If Mark is as dangerous as you say, you, Sarah, and even the kids could be at risk." Emma nodded. "I know. That's why I need your help. We need to find a way to get enough evidence to go to the authorities without tipping Mark off." Thomas leaned forward, his expression resolute. "I'll do whatever I can to help. Let me see those documents. Maybe there's something you've missed." Over the next few days, Thomas worked alongside Emma and Sarah, using his resources to dig deeper into Mark's activities. They found that Mark was indeed involved in various illegal enterprises, and Robert's financial ties to him were extensive. One evening, as Emma and Sarah were going through another batch of documents, Sarah's phone rang. She answered, her face growing pale as she listened. "Who was that?" Emma asked as Sarah hung up. "An old friend from college," Sarah replied, her voice shaking. "She works at a law firm in Seattle and mentioned that Mark has been under investigation by the FBI. They're building a case against him, but they don't have enough to arrest him yet." Emma's eyes widened. "This could be our chance. If we can provide the FBI with the evidence we have, they might be able to take both Mark and Robert down." Sarah nodded. "But we need to be careful. If Robert or Mark suspect we're onto them, they could disappear or worse." Emma's mind raced. "We need to act quickly. Let's gather everything we have and contact your friend. Maybe she can put us in touch with the right people." They spent the next day compiling all the evidence they had gathered, creating a detailed dossier of Robert's financial activities and his connections to Mark. Sarah's friend arranged a meeting with an FBI agent who was working on the case. The meeting was tense. The agent, a stern-looking man named Agent Carter, reviewed the documents with a critical eye. "This is substantial," he said finally, "but we need more concrete evidence to make an arrest. Can you get access to any more of Robert's financial records or communications with Mark?" Emma exchanged a glance with Sarah. "We can try, but it's risky." Agent Carter nodded. "I understand, but if we're going to bring these men to justice, we need to be thorough. I'll have my team ready to move as soon as we have enough." As Emma and Sarah left the meeting, they felt a mixture of hope and fear. They were closer than ever to exposing Robert and Mark, but the danger was also greater. "We have to be careful," Emma said as they walked to their car. "One wrong move and we could lose everything." Sarah nodded, her face set with determination. "We can do this, Emma. We have to, for our children and for ourselves." With renewed resolve, they returned to their investigation, determined to uncover the final pieces of evidence needed to bring Robert and Mark to justice. The journey had been long and fraught with danger, but Emma and Sarah were more determined than ever to see it through to the end. Emma and Sarah were seated in a cozy coffee shop, a safe distance away from the house where Robert's double life had unraveled. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, but neither woman was in the mood to savor it. Their minds were preoccupied with the gravity of their mission. They had meticulously planned this moment, but the question lingered. Were they truly ready to confront Robert? "Do you think we have enough evidence?" Sarah's voice trembled, her fingers fidgeting with the edge of her cup. Emma, sensing the other woman's anxiety, placed a reassuring hand on hers. "I believe so, but we need to be absolutely certain. One wrong move and he could slip away," Emma replied, her eyes firm with determination. They had already unearthed damning evidence of Robert's financial fraud, but they needed something irrefutable to ensure he faced justice. Their conversation was interrupted by the buzz of Emma's phone. It was Thomas. Ever since Emma had confided in him, Thomas had been an unwavering pillar of support. His keen insights and connections had been invaluable. Emma's feelings for him had grown, but she hadn't allowed herself to fully explore them, not while the shadow of Robert's deceit still loomed large. "Hello, Thomas," Emma answered, her voice softening. "Emma, I managed to get those bank statements you needed. They should help solidify your case." Thomas's voice was steady and reassuring. Emma felt a surge of gratitude. "Thank you, Thomas. This means a lot," she replied. "Be careful, Emma. This confrontation could be dangerous. Remember, I'm here if you need me," he added, his concern evident. Emma ended the call and turned to Sarah. "Thomas got us the bank statements. This might be the final piece we need." Sarah nodded, a mix of relief and tension on her face. "Let's do this." The plan was simple yet risky. They had decided to confront Robert when he was least expecting it, in the comfort of his home. With a deep breath, they made their way to the house. Every step felt heavy, the weight of their impending confrontation pressing down on them. As they approached the door, Emma turned to Sarah. "Are you ready?" Sarah nodded, her resolve hardening. "Let's end this." They entered the house, the familiar surroundings now tainted with the knowledge of Robert's duplicity. He was in the living room, completely unaware of the storm about to hit him. When he saw them, a look of confusion crossed his face. "Emma? Sarah? What are you both doing here?" he asked, trying to mask his nervousness. Emma stepped forward, her eyes blazing with fury. "We know everything, Robert. Your lies, your fraud, everything." Robert's face paled, but he quickly regained his composure. "I don't know what you're talking about." Sarah, her voice shaking but firm, held up a stack of documents. "These are the bank statements, Robert. We know about the fraud. We know about Mark." For a moment, Robert was silent, his mind racing. Then his facade cracked. "You have no idea what you're getting into," he hissed. "Mark is dangerous. If you expose me, he'll come after all of us." Emma felt a chill run down her spine. She knew Mark was a dangerous man, but hearing it from Robert made it all the more real. However, she couldn't back down now. "We're not afraid of him. This ends now." Robert's eyes darted around, looking for an escape. "You don't understand. I did this for us, for our future," he pleaded, desperation creeping into his voice. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "How could you say that? You betrayed us, both of us. There's no excuse for what you've done." Emma felt a pang of sympathy for Sarah, but she steeled herself. "We're going to the police, Robert. It's over." Robert's face contorted with rage. "You think you can just waltz into my life and ruin everything? I won't let you." Before they could react, Robert lunged at Emma, knocking her to the ground. Sarah screamed and tried to pull him away, but he was too strong. Emma struggled to free herself, her mind racing with fear and anger. Suddenly, the door burst open, and Thomas rushed in. He had sensed something was wrong and had followed them. Without hesitation, he tackled Robert, pulling him off Emma. The two men grappled, but Thomas's determination gave him the upper hand. He managed to pin Robert down, his face a mask of fury. "Stay down, you bastard," Thomas growled, his voice dripping with contempt. Emma scrambled to her feet, her heart pounding. She rushed to Sarah, who was sobbing uncontrollably. "It's okay, Sarah. It's over," she whispered, hugging her tightly. The police arrived soon after, having been alerted by a neighbor who heard the commotion. They took Robert into custody, his protests falling on deaf ears. Emma and Sarah watched as he was led away, a mixture of relief and sadness washing over them. Thomas approached Emma, his face softening with concern. "Are you okay?" Emma nodded, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you, Thomas. I don't know what we would have done without you." He smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You don't have to do this alone, Emma. I'm here for you always." As they left the house, Emma felt a weight lift off her shoulders. The road ahead would be challenging, but she wasn't alone. With Sarah by her side and Thomas's unwavering support, she felt a glimmer of hope for the future. Back at the coffee shop, Emma and Sarah sat in silence, the events of the day replaying in their minds. The confrontation had been intense, but they had finally taken the first step towards justice. Sarah broke the silence, her voice soft. "What now?" Emma took a deep breath, her eyes meeting Sarah's. "We move forward, together, and we ensure that Robert pays for everything he's done." Sarah nodded, a determined look on her face. "Agreed." Emma felt a sense of resolve settle within her. The journey had been harrowing, but they had come out stronger. And with Thomas by her side, she knew she could face whatever challenges lay ahead. Thomas had always been a pillar of support for Emma during her tumultuous journey of uncovering Robert's deceit. As her boss, he had seen her struggle to maintain her professional composure while her personal life crumbled. When Emma finally confided in him about Robert's double life and the fraudulent activities she and Sarah had discovered, Thomas didn't hesitate to offer his assistance. One late evening, as the office grew quiet and the hum of the fluorescent lights became the only sound, Thomas approached Emma's desk. "Emma," he said gently, "I think I can help you get the documents you need. I have a contact who owes me a favor and can access restricted financial records." Emma looked up, her eyes reflecting a mixture of hope and desperation. "Thomas, are you sure? This could be dangerous." Thomas nodded, his expression serious. "I'm sure. You've been through enough, and you deserve to see justice served. Let me make a few calls." True to his word, within days, Thomas secured access to a treasure trove of incriminating documents. These records detailed Robert's elaborate schemes, his offshore accounts, and the vast sums of money he had siphoned off through fraudulent investments. Emma and Sarah pored over the documents, their initial shock giving way to a steely determination. One evening, as they sat at Emma's kitchen table, surrounded by stacks of papers, Sarah looked up, her voice tinged with urgency. "Emma, look at this. There are transactions here that suggest Robert is planning to liquidate everything and disappear. If he succeeds, we'll lose any chance of holding him accountable." Emma's heart raced as she scanned the documents. "He's planning to flee. We need to act fast. Do you know of any upcoming events where he might be exposed?" Sarah thought for a moment. "There's a charity gala next weekend. Robert's company is one of the main sponsors. He'll be there, no doubt trying to present himself as a philanthropic businessman." Emma nodded, her mind racing with possibilities. "That's perfect. We'll confront him there, in front of everyone. But we need more concrete evidence to ensure he can't wiggle out of this." Determined, Emma and Sarah worked tirelessly to gather the final pieces of their puzzle. As the date of the gala approached, Emma found herself spending more time with Thomas, who had become an invaluable ally. One evening, as they reviewed the evidence in Thomas's office, Emma looked at him, her voice softening. "Thomas, I don't know how to thank you. You've been incredible through all of this." Thomas smiled, his eyes warm. "Emma, you're one of the strongest people I know. I'm just glad I could help." As they continued their work, Emma couldn't ignore the growing feelings she had for Thomas. He had been a rock for her, and she found herself drawn to his kindness and strength. But there was no time to dwell on her emotions. They had a mission to complete. The night of the gala arrived, and Emma and Sarah were ready. They had meticulously planned their confrontation, ensuring they had the evidence to back up their claims. The grand ballroom was filled with Seattle's elite, all dressed in their finest attire. The atmosphere was one of opulence and celebration, a stark contrast to the turmoil Emma felt inside. Emma spotted Robert across the room, charming a group of investors. Her blood boiled at the sight of him, but she kept her composure. She exchanged a glance with Sarah, who nodded in silent agreement. The time had come. Emma approached the podium where the evening speeches were being made. As she took the microphone, the room fell silent, all eyes on her. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice steady and clear, "I apologize for interrupting, but there is something you all need to know." Robert's smile faltered as he realized who was speaking. Emma continued, her voice gaining strength. "Robert has been living a lie, deceiving not only his family but also his business partners and investors. We have evidence of his fraudulent activities, his embezzlement, and his plans to flee with the stolen money. Gasps and murmurs filled the room as Emma and Sarah presented the damning evidence. Robert's face turned ashen, and he tried to make a hasty exit, but the room had become a buzz of chaos. Emma's heart pounded as she watched security move to block his path. Just as they had planned, Sarah stepped forward, holding up the final piece of evidence. This is the proof of Robert's offshore accounts and the transactions that show his intent to disappear. The room erupted in outrage as Robert was cornered. Emma felt a mix of triumph and sorrow as she watched the man she once loved being exposed for the criminal he was. But she knew this was only the beginning. The battle for justice had just begun, and with Thomas and Sarah by her side, she felt ready to face whatever came next. At the grand gala event held at the opulent Seattle Art Museum, the atmosphere was electric with the mingling of Seattle's elite. Glittering chandeliers cast a warm glow over the elegantly dressed attendees, their laughter and conversations creating a vibrant symphony of social interaction. Emma and Sarah, dressed to the nines, navigated through the crowd with purpose, their eyes scanning the room for Robert. The plan they had meticulously crafted over weeks was about to unfold, and the air was thick with anticipation and anxiety. Emma spotted Robert near a lavish ice sculpture, engrossed in conversation with a group of influential businessmen. She nudged Sarah, who took a deep breath, steeling herself for the confrontation. They approached Robert, their presence unnoticed until Emma cleared her throat loudly, drawing his attention. "Robert," Emma's voice was steady, though her heart pounded in her chest. "We need to talk." Robert's face paled as he saw Emma and Sarah standing together, a look of horror and disbelief flashing across his features. "Emma, Sarah, what are you doing here?" he stammered, trying to maintain his composure. "We're here to expose you for the liar and fraud you are," Sarah interjected, her voice shaking with a mix of anger and betrayal. The surrounding guests began to take notice, their conversations dwindling into hushed whispers as they watched the unfolding drama. Robert tried to pull Emma aside, but she resisted, her voice rising to capture the attention of everyone in the room. "You've been living a double life, Robert," Emma accused, her eyes blazing. "Not only did you betray us by having two families, but you also committed financial fraud to fund your deception." Sarah stepped forward, holding up a folder filled with incriminating documents. "We found the proof, Robert. The secret accounts, the fraudulent transactions. It's all here." A murmur rippled through the crowd as people craned their necks to get a better view. Robert's face twisted with desperation and fury as he realized his carefully constructed facade was crumbling. "You don't know what you're talking about," he spat, but his voice lacked conviction. Emma and Sarah stood their ground, unwavering. "We know exactly what we're talking about," Sarah retorted. "And so will the police." As if on cue, uniformed officers entered the room, their presence commanding attention. The guests parted, creating a clear path as the officers approached Robert. Panic flared in his eyes, and he made a sudden dash towards the exit, pushing through the crowd in a frantic attempt to escape. "Stop him!" Emma shouted, her voice echoing in the grand hall. The officers sprang into action, pursuing Robert through the opulent corridors of the museum. The guests watched in stunned silence as the chase unfolded, their evening transformed into a scene out of a high-stakes drama. Emma and Sarah followed the commotion, their breaths coming in short, anxious gasps. They reached the museum's grand staircase just in time to see Robert being tackled to the ground by the officers. He struggled briefly, his face contorted with rage and fear, but the officers quickly subdued him, slapping handcuffs onto his wrists. As Robert was hauled to his feet, his eyes met Emma's. For a moment, a flicker of the man she once loved appeared in his gaze, replaced almost instantly by cold hatred. "This isn't over," he hissed, but Emma stood firm, her expression resolute. "It is for you," she replied, her voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside her. The officers led Robert away, and the crowd slowly dispersed, the buzz of conversation resuming as people processed the dramatic events they had just witnessed. Emma felt a wave of relief wash over her, but it was tinged with deep sadness. The man she had once trusted implicitly was gone, replaced by a stranger capable of unimaginable deceit. Sarah placed a comforting hand on Emma's shoulder. "We did it," she said softly. "It's over." Emma nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Yes, it's over," she echoed, but she knew that in many ways it was just the beginning. The journey to rebuild their lives, to heal from the betrayal, would be long and arduous. As they left the museum, Emma's thoughts turned to Thomas, her boss who had been a pillar of support throughout the ordeal. She felt a bittersweet mix of gratitude and apprehension. Her feelings for him had grown stronger, but the scars left by Robert's treachery made her wary of trusting again. Outside, the cool night air was a stark contrast to the heated emotions inside the museum. Emma and Sarah stood together, looking out at the city lights. "What now?" Sarah asked, her voice filled with uncertainty. "We move forward," Emma replied, determination in her eyes. "We rebuild, we heal, and we make sure Robert's actions don't define us." Sarah nodded, drawing strength from Emma's resolve. "Together," she said. "Together," Emma agreed, a small but genuine smile forming on her lips. As they walked away from the museum, Emma felt a sense of closure. Robert's capture marked the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. She didn't know what the future held, but she was ready to face it head-on, with Sarah by her side and the lessons learned from this harrowing experience guiding her path. With Robert imprisoned, Emma and Sarah found themselves standing at the precipice of a new beginning, albeit a challenging one. The courtroom drama and media frenzy had left them emotionally drained, but there was a glimmer of hope in the aftermath. Emma, in particular, was grappling with a whirlwind of emotions. The betrayal by Robert had been a gut punch, but his incarceration brought a sense of justice. Now, she had to navigate the complexities of her life, both personal and professional. Emma's relationship with Thomas had been a surprising development amidst the chaos. His support had been a beacon of light during her darkest hours. As they spent more time together, she found herself falling for him, despite the emotional turmoil she was enduring. Thomas seemed to be everything Robert was not: supportive, understanding, and genuinely caring. One evening, as Emma sat with Thomas in a cozy cafe, she couldn't help but voice her concerns. "Thomas, I can't shake this feeling, this emptiness," Emma admitted, her eyes reflecting the inner storm she was battling. Thomas reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "Emma, what you've been through would break anyone. It's natural to feel this way, but I promise things will get better. I'm here for you." His words were reassuring, yet they did little to quell the unease that gnawed at Emma. She wanted to believe him, but the scars of Robert's betrayal ran deep. Meanwhile, Sarah was dealing with her own set of challenges. The financial strain left by Robert's fraudulent activities had taken a toll on her and her children. She had to find a way to provide for her family while dealing with the emotional wreckage. Emma and Sarah remained in close contact, their shared trauma forging an unbreakable bond. One afternoon, Emma received a call from Sarah. Her voice was filled with anxiety. "Emma, I've been going through some of the documents we collected. There's something that doesn't add up," Sarah said. "What do you mean?" Emma asked, her curiosity piqued. "I don't know how to put this, but there are transactions linked to Thomas. It looks like he might have been involved in Robert's schemes," Sarah revealed, her voice trembling. Emma's heart sank. She felt the room spin as the implications of Sarah's words hit her. Could Thomas, the man who had been her rock, be part of the very conspiracy that had shattered her life? Determined to uncover the truth, Emma began her own investigation. She combed through the documents with meticulous care, her mind racing. The more she dug, the clearer it became. Thomas had indeed been involved. He had manipulated the situation to his advantage, using Emma's vulnerability to cover his tracks. Confronting Thomas was the hardest thing Emma had ever done. One evening, she asked him to meet her at the park, a place that had once symbolized peace for her. "Thomas, we need to talk," Emma said, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. Thomas looked puzzled but nodded. "Of course, Emma. What's going on? I know what you did. I know you were involved in Robert's schemes." Emma stated, her eyes never leaving his. Thomas's face paled, but he quickly composed himself. Emma, I can explain. It's not what you think. Explain? You lied to me, manipulated me. You used me to cover your tracks. Emma's voice rose as the anger bubbled to the surface. Emma, please. I did it for us. I wanted to protect you, Thomas pleaded, reaching for her hand. Emma recoiled, her eyes filled with betrayal. Protect me? You shattered whatever trust one had left. I thought you were different, but you're just like him. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Thomas turned to leave. Emma, I'm sorry. I truly am, he said, his voice barely above a whisper before he walked away. Emma stood there, watching him disappear into the night, tears streaming down her face. She felt a mix of anger, sadness, and betrayal. But amidst the chaos, a new sense of determination emerged. She would not be a victim again. With Thomas gone, Emma and Sarah knew they had to face the consequences together. They continued to work with the authorities, providing all the information they had gathered. The investigation widened, uncovering a web of deceit that went beyond Robert and Thomas. Despite the emotional and financial challenges, Emma found strength in the support of her friends and family. She returned to work, determined to rebuild her life. The journey was far from easy, but each step forward was a victory. One day, as Emma sat in her office, reflecting on the past months, she felt a sense of accomplishment. She had faced unimaginable betrayal, yet she had emerged stronger. The pain and anger had been transformed into a relentless pursuit of justice. Emma decided to channel her experiences into something positive. She began volunteering at a local organization that supported victims of fraud and betrayal, sharing her story to help others heal. It was through this work that she found a renewed sense of purpose. Sarah, too, found solace in the community. She started a support group for women who had faced similar betrayals, using her own experiences to guide and support others. The bond between Emma and Sarah grew stronger, their shared journey a testament to their resilience. As time passed, Emma and Sarah learned to trust again, but with caution. They understood the importance of relying on themselves and each other. The ordeal had left scars, but it had also forged a bond that would never be broken. In the end, Emma realized that her journey was not just about seeking revenge or exposing the truth. It was about reclaiming her life, finding strength in adversity, and transforming her pain into a force for good. The road ahead was uncertain, but she was ready to face it, armed with the knowledge that she had survived the worst and emerged stronger. Emma glanced at a photo of her and Sarah, taken at a recent celebration of their victory against the odds. She smiled, knowing that no matter what challenges lay ahead, she had the strength to face them. The journey had been arduous, but it had also been a testament to the power of resilience, friendship, and the unwavering pursuit of justice. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to our channel now. Click the subscribe button and turn on notifications. Leave a like if you liked it.